Back in the early 80s, cocaine started becoming extremely big down in Miami. In fact, Miami, as far as the I-95 corridor there coming up through Florida, was a hotbed for interdiction officers. And some of them got really good at looking at traffic stops and looking beyond the traffic stop and beyond the violation to see if other violations were going on. And that's how they learned that these people were bringing cocaine in huge loads up into the rest of the country. Atlanta, Nashville, some of the bigger cities, Chicago, they were moving it up through there, and interdiction started becoming pretty large. Through that time, they decided that it was a whole lot easier to find the odor of cocaine or marijuana or heroin by utilizing canines. The principle behind doing that, they started looking at some of the bird dog trainers, Labrador Retriever trainers, if you would, and then a group of folks went over to Stuttgart, Germany, and learned a different system over there. And primarily the systems were about these hunting dogs that would actually search out and retrieve a duck and come back. They tried to formulate another duck, if you will, by having a piece of PVC pipe along with a substance inside of it. And what they figured is if the dog retrieved it enough times, they would gain an affection toward that odor, follow it to the source, grip the substance, and bring it back to the trainer. So what they did is they actually separated the duck, if you will, and took the ingredients of the duck out that had the odor and took the shell of the duck. And as the dog was searching for the substance, it would get to the substance, and they would try to fool the dog into thinking they threw the duck in over its head and thought that the dog would believe that. The problem is you're competing with an animal that can catch a fly out of the air. To think that we have to fool the dog into looking for something by throwing a toy or something else over the dog's head is absolutely one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen. To not give the animal credit enough for knowing that he can do a job to get what you have, to get what you have to offer him, that's the easiest way to go and the clearest way to the dog. Throwing something over his head when you can reach around there and actually give it to him and create a game at the source, in my mind of thinking, is the way to go.
There are, generally speaking, two types of detection training approaches: indication first and search first. Indication first methods are those set out to teach a desired response at target source from the very start, prior to any type of searching behavior. This has benefits for many reasons, the primary reason being that there is never any confusion in understanding the task being asked of the dog. When odor is located and followed to source, the dog is equipped with previously taught identifiable behaviors it can display to earn reward. The heavy lifting is already completed before any search is employed. If we consider that an alert resides at the end of a chain of behaviors that always end in a recognizable behavior at target odor source, it's logical that starting there and working backwards makes sense. Arming the dog with learned behaviors at target source asks the dog to only focus on reaching it, absolutely nothing more. The only tasks that remain beyond this alert behavior involve modifications to the environment that discriminate extraneous odors from source, neutralizing distractions, increasing durability, tenacity, and the conditioning of a cue. The beauty of the Hare method is its simplicity. From the beginning, the dog's education is logical, clear, and in a linear progression based on its ability to reach behavioral milestones. Video 1 of the original Substance Detector Dog series stated that the cardinal feature of Randy's method is that the dog educates itself. The handler is not the teacher. This is the overriding theme throughout, and critically important to understanding Randy's logical system.
The difference in what I do and what the traditionalists do is, I believe in my heart that the dog is smart enough to do what it takes to get what it is we have without fooling him into thinking he has to do it for that purpose. To try to fool a dog into thinking that he's looking for a particular toy that I have, that I'm going to throw in at the last moment and have it explode out away from the substance and have the dog believe that, is ridiculous to me. I've always believed that the dog had the ability to do what I wanted him to do in order to get what it is I had for a reinforcement. If he wanted it bad enough to do whatever it takes to get it. And that's the key, is having one that wants what you have badly enough to do whatever it takes to get it. The rest of it is just shaping. Not manipulating and showing, not driving it into him because you're human and he's a dog. Manipulating the environment, allowing the dog to figure it out for himself and get to the source. This is not that hard. We as human beings make it hard for the dog. We as human beings cause the dog not to be as reliable as he could be. You know, they've been using their nose to track down something, to bring it into their being and survive for years, hundreds of years. And we want to manipulate that a little bit to our advantage by forcing the dog to do something when he gets to the place where he can't get to the source. It's no wonder we have the problems that we have in detection today.
Through simple manipulations of the training environment, the dog is exposed to a range of experiences that compete for attention with target odor. Through these, the dog quickly and independently learns that the location of target source is the only thing that results in reward. Once this lesson is learned and conditioned, the likelihood of errors is greatly reduced and productivity is maximized.
Obedience to odor is recognizing that the dog already knows how to do this. We just need him to do it under the pretense for what we have to do to be successful. If he's looking for marijuana, if he's looking for cocaine, if he's looking for meth or heroin, you know, and he catches that odor and follows it to the source, that's what we call obedience to odor. We've been missing a huge advantage in our detection training by thinking that there has to be some sort of a pattern. It really doesn't have to be a pattern. There has to be a freedom for the dog to catch that odor, follow it to the source, and there has to be an understanding on the human's part that if we allow him to do that, he will make us famous. But if you're doing a pattern around the room and it's hidden in the ceiling, what kind of chance do you really have? Unless the dog's allowed to be obedient to odor, get up on those back legs and actually show you he's trying to get to the source from time and time again of being allowed to do just that.
This is critically important and worth mentioning in more detail. The dog must learn from the beginning that despite all of the sensory information that's available, scent, sounds, objects, and obstacles, the single behavior that will result in reward is determining the location of and indicating a target odor source. The dog's obedience to odor is the holy grail of detection work. That is, its eventual and absolute understanding that only the indication at odor source is what triggers reward presentation. Once this is made crystal clear to the dog, the remainder of our work is spent teaching the dog to persist in indicating, resist distraction, work in a variety of environments, and finally, injecting the handler back into the search equation as an occasional source of useful information.
Again, from the time the dog was a puppy, everything has been about his eyes and ears except for when he was, 1 to 6 weeks of age, or from birth to 6 weeks of age, where he used his nose in order to find food from that point. The eyes and ears have been a foundation of obedience and protection training as the dog comes up. And then when we start doing the detection training, we want to get in the way and show him what to do. We have to realize that the more we get out of the way and manipulate the environment and allow the dog to learn for himself, the better off we are. These cues, when we throw the ball in, he's waiting for it to come over his head. Maybe he smells the substance, maybe he doesn't. What we're trying to accomplish is to allow the dog to use his nose without the eyes and ears. Traditional training have always, check here, check here, check here. It's always about the eyes and the ears, and you don't give him a chance to use his nose. He never gets a chance to use it. But when we allow him to learn for himself and he smells that odor, follows it to the source and gets paid, he's learning every time that odor has a significance to him. You put 3 hides in a room, start going around, you want him to hit on this one over here first. He may smell the one coming from across the room, but he doesn't have the freedom to go over there and do anything about it. He's got to follow you. So he learns to just pay attention to you. The eyes and ears are always on you. He false alerts because of you. He hits something a lot of times because of what you do. not because he has the freedom to follow that odor over to the source and give you behavior consistent with getting reinforced.
The handler's role then during early training is, by design, minimal. The primary responsibility of the handler is to foster a learning environment that is error-resistant while conditioning the dog for work. The goal here is to teach the dog to trust only his nose, but even further, that his eyes and ears must be actively disregarded. They will not lead him to reward, but away from it. The environment must be structured to build anticipation through cues and signals, but more on that later.